Everyone knows therapy is great for solving problems, but getting therapy has its own problems too, like finding the right therapist, fitting into their schedule, and of course, the cost. Well, BetterHelp can solve those problems. It's totally online and built around your schedule. It's surprisingly affordable too. Connect with a credentialed therapist by phone, video, or online chat, all from the comfort of your home. Visit BetterHelp.com to learn more and save 10% on your first month. That's BetterHelp, H-E-L-P.
I'm Sandra, and I'm just the professional your small business was looking for. But you didn't hire me because you didn't use LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn has professionals you can't find anywhere else, including those who aren't actively looking for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role, like me.
In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you'll miss out on great candidates like Sandra. Start hiring professionals like a professional. Post your free job on linkedin.com/people today.
Hello guys, welcome to this week's episode of Heavy Metal Tones with me, your podcast host Tony Evans. This is part 2 of my journey into a boyhood hero Gary Moore's life. As of last week, you would have hopefully heard last week's episode with a brief rundown. Obviously I would have got everything covered, but most of it. One thing I didn't say last week, and sort of after I'd recorded it and actually put it out, I thought, I've never really thought about this, but how more perfect was one man's connection with an inanimate object like the guitar, like Gary Moore's connection with the greeny guitar, and it wasn't just because the pickups are wired out of phase. I mean, that because other guitars can be done. It was just the way that was. It can be done on other guitars. I was want to say, there was something about the wood of that guitar, the blood, sweat, and tears that went into it, oils from the fingers of the greats, and it was that period of the Gibson factory when everything they touched was gold, literally. And so, you can separate Gary from his Gibson, but in wherever he is now, he's playing that guitar, right? He said in interviews that he didn't really care for it, and he'd drill holes in it and do things to it, and it was just a tool. But I think really deep down, if he had to really be honest with himself, it was imbued with his soul, if you know what I mean. Anyway, I just wanted to say that. I completely forgot last week, and I didn't want to miss out and not say it this week. So a real sort of difficult episode this one was for me to do, part 2, because I decided stupidly, as I do these things, that I'll do a top 5 or whatever. And with a lot of things, with a catalogue as big as Gary's, and the way that my mind works, what was top 5 yesterday may not be top 5 today, and it may not be tomorrow, and so on. So capturing it for all time, posterity, not posterior, for people to hear and judge me by, is quite a tricky thing to do, because these sort of top 5 thingy listy things are very personal, aren't they, right? And you may not agree with me, you may agree with me, you may go, oh, bloody hell, I never thought of that. I mean, the catalogue of the man is massive. Now, yes, towards the end of his career, and the end of his life, I should say, it was mainly blues stuff, so it was very, it was a simple one to work out. I actually didn't really go beyond Still Got the Blues, just to give you some background. Okay, so you don't go hoping that I'm going to play, blues for Greenie or something on here. Talk about that. Look, the reason I didn't go beyond Still Got the Blues is that his later career, once that album came out, and it, no spoilers, I'm sure you know it's going to be in the list. spoilers, you should say. Sorry, too late. Is that he was much more diverse. Even though he would, as I said last week, he really thought everything before that album was shit, because he was very hard on himself, because he didn't really know which direction he wanted to just play the blues. And you know what? Had he just come out a full-on, bums to the wall, heads down blues man, he probably would not have made the impression that he did and had the ability to gain the career that he had and play with the people he had. Not because he didn't have the skills, because clearly they are there. It would be because it would have got lost amongst the mire of many, many, many bluesmen and women that have sort of got mixed amongst the 12-bar blues sound, if you know what I mean. And Gary, because he experimented and played in bands like Colosseum and played fusion jazz and played, some tracks he's done are sort of progressive, and he's done heavy rock, and he's bordered on heavy metal, and he's sort of influenced the shredding genre or guitarists of the 80s and 90s with the speed that he could play, all that kind of thing. It allowed him, I think, that when he decided through that chance conversation on one of his tours, because he used to warm up and play blues to warm up before we went on stage, that chance conversation with, I think it was Don Airy, I said, wasn't it? I said, hey, why don't you go and make an album? It might sell some records. And Christ, it did. It sell some records. So it hit the moment. It hit when it was needed. It was the right time to have a blues-driven album right there and then, and that, burgeoning moment of the new decade, when we were coming out of the sort of the mire of the boring 90s. Sort of was either a mix of late 80s, which was a sort of R&B and electronic and R&B and blandness and sloppy pop, and the rise of Stock Aitken and Waterman, if you know what I mean. I'm not going to go at them. They very, very professional, know what they're doing, but they just pushed out a lot of Tribe, did it not? I mean, for those that grew up in the UK like me, we had to listen to every single Australian soap opera a star seemed to have a single. Now, Kylie Minogue, I have a lot of time for. I like Kylie Minogue. I really do. I think she's a brilliant songstress, a great performer. And she just wrote some really catchy pop songs. And she really was genuinely a good musician. But there's a lot of shit that came out around that time. I think the people were waiting for, we were just getting sort of we were going to crash headfirst into Britpop, weren't we? With mid 90s. But until then, we didn't have a lot of guitar-based music, and Gary was that outlet for us, and I know it was for me. And so I didn't go after that. I just wanted to do stuff really for me, the stuff that I really enjoy listening to. I mean, I listen to all Gary Moore's albums. As I told you, I've got every single album I really like, and apart from Skunk, was it Skunk I don't have? I really do love Scar, sorry. I really do love his stuff. And so we're going to start with albums. And in at number 5, is Still Got the Blues. And I'm sure you're shaking your head at me and going, what do you mean? But you said it was a really amazing album. It is an amazing album, and it does have some brilliant performances on it. It's got Don Airy on keys, it's got Bob Daisley on drums, he of Ozzy Osbourne and Don Airy of Deep Purple. It's got Albert King and brilliant, and Albert Collins. Albert King is my favourite blues guitarist. I came across him because of Gary. That's how much Gary influenced me in the early 90s. And I love Albert King's work. Playing all that solos on one string, just tall, towering man with a flying V strung left over, because he was a left-handed, it was a right guitar, and he held that guitar like it was a matchstick. Massive man, smoked a pipe, big glasses, played beautiful blues. God rest you, Albert. You're up there playing with Gary now, I'm sure, because I know he was Gary's favourite. And it's brilliant. Tracks like Moving On, Oh Pretty Woman, Walk By Myself, Still Got the Blues for You, the classic single that made lots of noise in the 90s. Texas Strut, that fast Texas blues that Gary was well known for. Too Tired with Albert Collins, King of the Blues, which is about Albert King. As years go passing by, Midnight Blues. I mean, they're really, really great tracks. It is a brilliant album, and for someone jumping into Gary Moore for the first time, they usually go straight to Still Got the Blues, and unfortunately that then I think blinkers you slightly for what he did before, and what he did before, if he's listening to this up there, Gary, and I hope you are, says to himself, no, I'm Still Got the Blues was my groundbreaking album. From there onwards really is me, because before then he considered himself a guitar for hire, which I think is not true, because his solo albums and the stuff he did with other bands like Thin Lizzy, like Greg Lake, like with BBA and all that sort of Colosseum, and Skid Row, he brought something exciting and vivacious and irresistible to everything he did, and he had his signature sound. I could tell a Gary Moore solo without even knowing the way that his sound is produced, what he comes through his amps, whatever pedals he's using, usually straight through the amp. I don't think he's a great big pedal user. I think it's usually straight in. That's why I think he uses the JMC 80s, JMC 100s. As I said last week, that's where he gets that sound. So if you hear me scratching noise, it's me scratching my head. Just helps me think. You know what I mean? So yeah, in at 5, Still Got the Blues. Highly recommend having it in your collection if you want to go and listen to some Gary Moore. But I would start at my number 1 first, and then I'd work back to number 5. If you're lazy and don't want to do that, fine, go straight to go. But if you think that's all you want to hear and you just want to hear his blues, then Still Got the Blues onwards is brilliant. Or even BBMA, BBMA, yeah. Sorry, going for that forward, Bruce Baker and Moore, the BBM album. BBMA, where did I get the A from? It might be the way to go, but that's number 5. So, that out of the way, because I didn't want to linger on the album. I love it, but I didn't want to linger on it because I think his career is vastly more than just one album. And I'm looking at a picture of him now on my table to give me inspiration, and he's probably staring at me going, yes, Tony, I am more than that. Now, we're going to move to number, where am I at? 4. Now, so many difficult albums, so many albums of his early career that I really enjoy, but this one's a solo album. It's his second solo album. It's Corridors of Power. Again, brilliant cast of musicians on here. Ian Pace on drums of Deep Purple, Neil Murray from White Snake on bass, John Sloman on backing vocals from Uriah Heep. All right. I mean, Don Airey on keys and Tommy Airey on keys. And Tom Airey's... Now, listen to this. Listen to this for a catalogue of musicians that Tommy has played with. White Snake, Greg Lake, B.B. King, John Mayall, Ian Gillan, Joe Cocker, Tracy Chapman. Jerry Rafferty played the keyboard in the opening bit of Baker Street. Michael Schenkner. Sensational Alex Harvey Band. I mean, no wonder that I love this bloody album. I mean, it's just there... In a one easy mix is me. I mean, apart from John Mayall, I'm not a huge John Mayall fan, but Ian Gillan, Greg Lake, B.B. King, White Snake, Joe Cocker, God, Paul Schenkner. Even I love Tracy Chapman as well. So really, amazing musicians on his albums. Now, It's very much a rock album. It has influences of the blues in it, but it's very much a rock album. You've got Don't Take Me, I'm a Loser, Don't Take Me, I'm a Loser, Always Gonna Love You, Wishing Well, which is the Cream cover song, which is one of my favourites. Don't want to give any spoilers, but it's one of my favourites of all time of Gary's. And his version of it is just blows the original one out of the water, and I love Free as a band. Gonna Break My Heart Again, Falling in Love with You, End of the World, Rocking Every Night, Cold Hearts, and I Can't Wait Until Tomorrow. A lot of these titles on a lot of these songs are very blues driven. Okay, you can hear in the titles that he's influenced by the great classic blues albums of the 60s and 70s, right? Even earlier, the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. But it is it's a rocking album with blues influences. Okay, the first 25,000 copies came with a live EP recorded at the Marquee on the 25th of August 1982. And to say that that's one of my holy grail records, it would be an understatement. That one and Headless Cross by Black Sabbath, as you might all know. But this one is amongst Gary Moore collectors. His 25,000 copies sounds like a lot, but it isn't a lot when you think in 82. A lot of this stuff got separated, sold away, separate, never kept with the record, played and thrown away, damaged, given away. They weren't all loved and collected like they are now, sadly. So these, it's quite an inordinately rare EP, and I've got the original copy of the album, and I would love the EP to go with it. Highlights on the album for me, as I said, Wishing Well, and that live is just superb. His version of that live, his solo on it is crazy. I mean, he had this. B.B. King said, or was it Albert King said to him, the spaces that you leave between the notes. And I said this before, I've done an episode on it way back at the beginning of my show, the history of my show, right back one of the early episodes. I did an episode called The Space Between the Notes, guitar solos. And I truly believe that great guitar solos are about the spaces between the notes. It's not all about how many fucking notes you can pound into a line. It is the space and the breaths between them. And Gary was told that by Albert King, and or was Albert Collins, one of those two. I want to misquote myself, but though, and he learned that, and you can tell in his later albums that he has a breath. He uses breaths really well between the notes, whereas the earlier stuff, it was, as I said, because he became one of those sort of icons of the shredding scene, it was all about the speed and the notes and the movement within the key and structure and chords of the music. But later life, it became much more breathy. Whereas this album, I said, Wishing Well, oh God, unbelievable. Falling in Love with You, I love. Rocking Every Night, Cold Hearts, I Can't Wait Till Tomorrow is, again, he does a version of that on a live album I've got, and it honestly, along with stuff like Empty Rooms, it really makes the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. Right, it really does. Side note, Empty Rooms is not in my top 5 songs. I'm trying to stick away and walk away from, again, like with the Still Got the Blues, everyone knows that song, Empty Rooms. It's got one of the iconic, if not probably considered one of the greatest Gary Moore solos of them all. I want to avoid those. I want to find songs that I love that are not that I'm trying to be elitist or different, but I want I want your listeners, I want listeners of the show to adventure beyond what, this isn't about always just about what I love. It's also about maybe giving you something different. So that was what was hard about this list. So I could have just put all the easy ones on there, simple, show over, but why would I bother? Anyway. And then we're going to move to number 3 in my list, and that's BMA, the collaboration with Jack Bruce, Ginger Baker, and himself. Released in 1993, yes, about 4 weeks in the charts, disappeared. They split up very soon after the album coming in. They did a very small tour. It's quite a long album. It is an album of 2 parts, okay? I've got it at number 3 for 2 reasons. It's at number 3 for the first reason because the first part of the album is very Cream-like. When you first put it on, you could think you'll listen to Cream version 2. Because it is Ginger Baker, is, Jack Bruce, one of the greatest bass players of all time, one of the greatest drummers in Ginger Baker of all time, one of the greatest albums, Cream's Disraeli Gears, one of the greatest trios of them all, bar none in my opinion. And so it sounds very, 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 very Cream Mark II. It has that, you first listen to it, it opens up with an incredible, you think it was Clapton, the way that the wah is going in, and the way that Gary's using the wah pedal on the first 2 tracks of this album, on Walking, Waiting in the Wings and City of Gold. It's just, it is just very, very wonderful. And when I first heard it, I just went, I smiled. I thought, Cream about it. Just maybe I thought, this is it. I found it. This is the golden answer, right? And then it changes as we head through the album, where we're in the world, Can't Fool the Blues, High Cost of Living, Glory Days, Why Don't We Have to Go, Why Don't Love Have to Go, Naked Flame, I Wonder Why, and Wrong Side of Town. They all then become very Gary. And they do switch in and out because Jack Bruce sings in the first 2 songs, and then he switches in and out of vocals on the later songs. And Jack has got a very, very distinctive voice. My problem with it is that because it's so Jekyll and Hyde of an album, I couldn't put it any higher, but I couldn't put it any lower because I do love the fact that it is like Cream version 2. I think there's a reason why they were so... Ginger Baker said that Gary had such an ego that he couldn't stand playing with him. And I think when I listen to the album, I think I know why. When I re-listen to it for this purposes of this podcast, I think I know why. Because it is so much Gary and less Ginger and Jack. And I think Gary sort of overtook proceedings because Gary wrote almost all of the tracks, and I think that didn't help. I think people like Ginger and particularly Ginger, he would have looked at it and said, "Well, no, hang on, I'm Ginger Baker. I'm playing on Sunshine for Your Love. I'm Ginger Baker. I play with Eric Clapton at Albert Hall. I made the greatest psychedelic album of them all. I'm Ginger Baker," and I think that's the problem. After watching the movie about Ginger Baker, you sort of understand why. And so the album is sort of a cursed album, Jekyll and Hyde album, but it's beautifully in the middle at number 3. Really perfect for this list. Now, I'm going to have a break now because I've just realised, looked at the thing, it's 22 minutes in and I haven't stopped talking. And you'd say, well, that's something new for you, Tony, is it? But that is the truth. I could talk for hours, but I do need to give you a break. So I'm going to come in on part 2 and do 2 to 1, and then we'll do my 5 songs after that. Let's see how we go, shall we? See you on the other side. Bye for now.
Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds. Recently, I asked Mint Mobile's legal team if big wireless companies are allowed to raise prices due to inflation. They said yes. And then when I asked if raising prices technically violates those onerous 2-year contracts, they said, "What the f*** are you talking about, you insane Hollywood ass f- So to recap, we're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month. Slows full terms at mintmobile.com.
Everyone knows therapy is great for solving problems. But getting therapy has its own problems too. Like finding the right therapist, fitting into their schedule, and of course, the cost. Well, BetterHelp can solve those problems. It's totally online and built around your schedule. It's surprisingly affordable, too. Connect with a credentialed therapist by phone, video, or online chat, all from the comfort of your home. Visit BetterHelp.com to learn more and save 10% on your first month. That's BetterHelp, H-E-L-P.
Burrow is a furniture company known for timeless design and thoughtful construction, and free shipping, and that extends to their outdoor collection. Their outdoor furniture is built to withstand the elements, featuring rust-proof stainless steel hardware, weather-ready teak, and quick-dry foam cushions. For Memorial Day, get 15% off your Burrow purchase at burrow.com/ACAST and up to 25% off outdoor. That's up to 25% off outdoor furniture at burrow.com/ACAST.
Millions of people have lost weight with personalized plans from Noom, like Evan, who can't stand salads and still lost 50 pounds.
Salads generally for most people are the easy button, right? For me, that wasn't an option. I never really was a salad guy. That's just not who I am. But Noom worked for me.
Get your personalized plan today at Noom.com. Real Noom user compensated to provide their story. In 4 weeks, the typical Noom user can expect to lose 1 to 2 pounds per week. Individual results may vary.
Welcome back to part 2, guys. I'm sure you're desperately wanting to know what's going to be number 2 and what's going to be number 1. Well, obviously, as you know, I've jumped around a bit. I've gone. I mean, I did think. I thought for a little while about where I would go for number 2, and it was quite a tricky one for me. Because, as I said before, I'm playing in that Still Got the Blues era for Gary, and I'm going to jump straight into. This is obvious territory. This is the same as how obvious would it be to put Still Got the Blues on the list. This is similar. This is Black Rose, a rock legend. Thin Lizzy's 9th studio album, sorry. The reason that I've picked this is because it like the thing BBM. I cannot say it right. Like BBM, this is like the perfect crossover. This is the moment where you go, a genuine guitar hero, legend. A lot like Clapton. So he took over Clapton basically for Cream 2 in B. I'm going to say again, BBM. With this one, because Phil and himself played together in Skid Row for a little while, knew each other for years, around the scene in Ireland. Gary would say that there wasn't many black men in Ireland in the 60s, and Phil being a dazzling black man from a mixed family, which was even rarer then. You just have to watch his movie about Phil Lynott to understand his life and what happened. He was always hanging around him, and he did a lot of tours, I said last week, but he couldn't do many with them because their drug and alcohol abuse was too great and was ruining his guitar playing. But when he finally settled down and made Black Rose a rock legend, it just blows your mind how good this album is. And I think to myself, how could Gary, what would have happened if Phil hadn't been such a nihilist and and the band and they stuck together and they made more out. Oh my God, it just makes this getting like the same with the BBM. It makes my skin tingle when I think about it, right? But the album itself, tracks are Do Anything You Want, Toughest Street in Town, S&M, Waiting for an Alibi, Sarah on the A side, and then you flip it over, Got to Give It Up, Get Out of Here, With Love, and then the wonderful 4-track suite of Roisin. I cannot say it in Irish correctly because I do not want to offend any Irish listeners. Roisin Dub, I think it says, which is Black Rose, a rock legend. I think that unpronounceable Irish word is Black Rose, which is Shenandoah, which is a river in, I believe, in the Appalachian Mountains. But anyway, Shenandoah, Will You Go, Lassie Go, Danny Boy, which was sung at his funeral, and I think that says the Mason's Apron, or hang on, let me pause and read my handwriting. It's terrible. The Master's Apron, sorry, terrible handwriting. But it's just wonderful because it has the full Phil Lynott Thin Lizzy sound, that very Gaelic, joyous, raucous rock and roll, leather clad, stud wielding, loud amped guitars, so different for what anything was being played in Ireland at the time. If you think about what was coming out of Ireland then, this was 79, so you did have the Stick Little Fingers and the Undertones and things like that had already come out by then. But if you think as that they were forming well before then, this is Rory Gallagher and him and Gary Moore and Thin Lizzy and Gary Moore, just brilliant breeding ground for rock and roll and such wonderful performers. And the album has that feeling, it feels, and it's got Gary stamped all over it. You can hear him come in, and when he plays this beautiful piece of music over the single Sarah, which was released, was written by Phil about his daughter, and it is such a tender and beautiful song to end side one, and it is this lead single off the album. It's so beautiful. I almost had it in my top 5 singles, but songs of Gary Moore, but that he played on. But it's not. It's unfair to Phil for that, so I'm leaving that one off. But it's a beautiful album. It's they say it's the quintessential Thin Lizzy album. I have to agree. Vagabonds maybe is there, but this is definitely the quintessential one. And I think the song Waiting for an Alibi, someone did say that it was the most educated and interesting heavy rock song ever written. It's so I don't know, it's just something about it. It's really, really thoughtful. It's brilliantly composed. It's got great, the solo on it is so dynamic. Probably one of the best solos that Gary ever played, to be brutally honest, on that one. And it's not even his album. I think he could just let go because he could just play. He's just a guitarist. He's not the main face of the album, and I think that's what makes such a joyous album, this one, because he does feel free. And the introduction, Steve Gorham, who plays with Thin Lizzy, has always played with Thin Lizzy, is a masterful guitarist. Masterful. I admire his work immensely. But him and Gary on the same, it's just like, I don't know, crazy. And so we're going to come into number one. And number one, you're going to think to yourself, what's number one? What would he have as number one? And I'm going to say right out the blocks, it's not the very first Gary Moore, it's very much the very first Gary Moore solo album. Because the very first Gary Moore album was Gary Moore and the Band. This is just back on the streets, 1978. September of 1978, it charted number 5. Did pretty well. It's 35 minutes and 44 seconds long. It's my absolute favourite of his because it's so diverse. It is so diverse. It has rock and roll. It has prog. It has 3 wonderful instrumental pieces, which is something that Gary moved away from towards the end, which is a shame because he did a lot of fantastic instrumental work. He's got Parisian Walkways on there, I know. I know that's the one everyone thinks I'm going to talk about. I'm not right now. Again, spoilers, not on my top 5 list. What did I do? I should have had you hanging on tenterhooks. It was produced brilliantly, co-produced with Gary and a Greek producer called Chris. Now I'm going to really butcher this guy's name. Tsagandaris, who produced Thin Lizzy, Judas Priest, Halloween, Anvil, Tigers of Pang Tang, to name a few. All right, Tragically Hip. This one's for John. Now, John, my good friend John, is a big fan of the Tragically Hip, a Canadian band. Sadly, the lead singer died of, I think, brain tumor. Am I right, John? I hope I didn't get that wrong. Only like a few years back, and yeah, John really is a really big fan of theirs, and it was really sad news when he got sick and died. And I think John was in Canada at the time. I'm look again. Sorry, John. I might be misunderstanding your history. Anyway, he's a big fan of them. He also did Depeche Mode as well, and Tom Jones. So quite diverse. Had the big hit single, which came out on the 30th of the 3rd, 1979, Parisian Walkways. And Back on the Streets was a single as well. It's certainly, I mean, it has a brilliant, let me just get my notes, has a brilliant set of musicians on this album. I mean, you've got Don Airey again. You've got who have we got here? On my handwriting. You've got Phil Lynott plays on a load of course. You've got John Mayall from Colosseum 2 plays on it. Brave Downing from Thin Lizzy drums was on it. Simon Phillips percussion is also from who was a jazz fusion percussionist from Toto, the drummer, from 1992 to 2014. It is an absolute brilliant. Huey Lewis from Huey Lewis and the News plays the harmonica on Sarah. Just superb, really. It's my number one because it comes out of the gates and it says, "I am Gary Moore." Right, I am Gary Moore. So you got Back in the Streets is the lead single from it, and Back on the Streets is the lead single from it. It's got a picture of him on the front coming out of a prison, which is Wormwood Scrubs, which is in the East End of London. Very famous hard man prison from the East End there. It sort of says, "Don't fall with me," because he does have that hard man image, right? He really does. He has that kind of "don't fuck with me," guys. And listen to this for a lineup of tracks, right? Let's have a listen to this. Back on the Streets, Don't Believe a Word, Fanatical Fascists, Flight of the Snow Moose, Hurricane, Song for Donna, What Would Be You Rather Be, A Wasp, Parisian Walkways. That is fantastic. Now, when you go and listen to these albums on modern streaming services, they always bung loads and loads of extra tracks on. As I said before on the show, do me a favour, if you're going to hear them, just listen to the very last genuine track and then absorb it, listen to it for a few times, and then listen to the bonus tracks, because I think it's unfair for first-time listeners to be given bonus tracks to stuff they haven't really absorbed yet. I think that's for fans. It really still bugs me that you can't just go on to these streaming platforms and listen to the album. It has to have always extra bits and reissues, and don't mind if it's been remixed maybe, but if it's been remixed and it's remastered, let listeners hear the first release, and then make their mind up whether they're going to listen to the reissues or not. Yeah. Please Spotify, please iTunes and other platforms, please release producers of music. Can we hear albums how they were intentionally heard by our friends, family and relatives way back, maybe? Do we have to always have U-Boot updated versions all the time? That's why I generally listen to my music on analog audio because I can put the original record on and play it and not have to be bombarded with strange mixes. I mean, just annoys me. Anyway, that was that's enough of that. It's mixed beautifully. It's fast. It opens with that, brilliant. Back on the streets. It's a call to arms straight away. It is a mix because it came out in 78. There is a sort of there's sort of a punkiness to it, or an anti-punk to it. There's sort of like a pushback because there's some fast rock and roll. It does, and it could be considered. It does sound a little like a Thin Lizzy album, to be honest. Now, apparently Gary said he'd do Black Rose if Phil did stuff on here, on this album. So it was a nice sort of like little handshake thing with each other, and you can hear the nuances on it, the differences on it. The solos are very crisp. The separation on my copy is wonderful. I've got an original vinyl copy from 78. It's clean. It's different. It's so different from what was coming out at the time. It surprises me it's not considered one of his great albums. I mean, as I said, most things are overshadowed by Still Got the Blues for You, which I feel is a shame because, even stuff I haven't covered like Colosseum and Greg Lake albums and the stuff he's done elsewhere is potentially someone's favourite song of all time. Potentially someone's favourite album of all time. I still think that this is my favourite Gary Moore album. It could change, tomorrow. Actually, no, I think this will always be my favourite Gary Moore album. I think of the early albums, this is my favourite of his fall albums with him, because I do like the mix of styles of music and the pace of the album. And it's sort of fresh, and his voice is clean and fresh, and the guitar is heavy and fast, and it's not heavy rock, which is what he went into in the later albums, like the sort of like the mid 80s albums that Victims of the Future and so on. I think they were a bit wayward because he was riding a wave of that heavy rock sound. He says he wasn't, but no, we all know that really he probably was. But then he found himself, his true self, in the blues from 1989 onwards. So this is the end of my top 5 albums. I really hope you do go and listen to them. I will remember to write them down in the show notes, if I do remember. If I don't, you'll have to listen to the show with a pen and paper. Or go back and listen to it again. I don't mind. Let's quickly run, while time is running out, my top 5 songs. Now, these songs, okay, don't necessarily come on albums I've talked about, but most of them I have. I'm going to start at 5, as we always like to do, with a song written by Phil Lynott for Gary for his first album. I consider Phil Lynott as one of the greatest songwriters, lyricists of the 20th century. He sits there with John Lydon, with Elvis Costello, and Paul Weller, and Billy Bragg, and Jazz Coleman, all those great, wonderful, brilliant, all of them, all the greats of the early 80s, late 70s. And he had a really good way of capturing the zeitgeist of the time, and he wrote a song called Fanatical Fascists, which is on the first album, which is about skinheads and violence, growing up in hatred, and it's sort of, because it was 78, it sort of feels a bit like an attack on the sadly wrong side of punk, the oi side of punk, the skinhead, violent, the Screwdriver kind of guys. If you know who they are, I'm not going to talk about them, but Screwdriver was a fascist band. Skinheads, not the neo-Nazi movement of that music. And I have still to this day have no understanding where that came from, because none of that message was ever portrayed by any of the punks in the first wave of the movement. Not one of it. Do not know. All I think is they just see the violence in the music and and force it onto them, using it for their own agenda. Anyway, that's another show entirely. But it's a brilliant lyric. It's got a great solo, and it is one of my. I enjoy listening to it a lot because it's something you don't expect from Gary. And I'm gonna say at 5, I'm gonna put an honourable mention at 5. It's a dual header at 5, because at 5 I'm gonna put Flight of the Snow Moose with that one linked, tied together from the same album. It's a 6-minute instrumental piece that is a stab at Camel's Flight of the Snow Goose, their massive prog journey of guitar, synth, drum, bass and madness. It's a brilliant album. If you don't like Camel, then that's fine. If you can't do a full instrumental album, then that's also something that some people can't do. Then this will give you some sort of idea of what it is about. I don't know if it was deliberate attack at Camel, because he played in prog bands, he played in fusion jazz bands like Colosseum too. I think it was just that it was the time the charts were being sort of held in place by either punk, which was a main thing, or prog, which was what the punks were trying to fight against, right? So it was quite interesting. I don't know if it's a stab at that, but it's certainly sort of in the same vein as Fanatical Fascist, but it's got a beautiful guitar tone in it, and it does sound like something that Campbell would have done. In at number 3, yes, I've Still Got the Blues for You. It's at number 3, right in the middle, because it's a song that brought millions of people to the great man who had never heard of him before. It is a song that made him comfortable financially. It is a song that that when I first heard it, I loved the blues from a very, very young age, and not many people I knew listened to the blues apart from my older brother. And when I heard this song, it basically said to me, it's okay to love the blues. You don't have to hide away, because as teenagers in the 80s, it was a really difficult time, because you couldn't love prog because that was a dirty word. Punk had changed into something unrecognizable. If it didn't have a synth, big hair, and auto tune within an inch of its life, it wasn't listened to. You weren't trendy enough. It was a difficult time for people that liked music in a different way. So to me, it was like a call to arms. To me, it's a call to arms for modern blues. It was. I don't think, genuinely don't think that a lot of these modern blues albums that have done very well would have done without Still Got the Blues by Gary Moore. I just don't think they would. Now, I don't have Parisian Walkways on this list for one and one whole reason only, is it's one that every bastard knows, okay? I love it, don't get me wrong, I really, really love it, but I want to talk about songs that maybe not everyone would know. I mean, most people will know Still Got the Blues, but they may not know the other two. Now, in it too is Wishing Well, the cover of the Free song. Now, this one is on the Corridors of Power, but it's also the live version that he did of this is bloody brilliant. Like, it's just, I think this is a particular solo that he loves a lot. Watching his hands blur going through the Wishing Well solo, he brings out so much passion and adventure and movement and joy to this song. He takes a brilliant song by a brilliant man like Free, and who everyone knows for All Right Now, okay? If you don't, those are going, who's this Free? What's this Free band Tony's talking about? Their big single was All Right Now, All Right Now, baby, it's all right now. I can't sing, I'm not going to try, but that is, well, I tried then. You know the one. That single, right, that's been covered by a lot of people. It's a brilliant, brilliant song, but Wishing Well, I've got a brilliant live album called Free Live, and the album looks like an envelope, and you open it like an envelope. It's brilliant, and it's pulled out like the inner sleeves like a letter. Those that have got it, and I think for rightly Wishing Well is on there. I'm sure it is. I haven't. I've got to go back and pull it out and have a look. But either way, it is brilliant, and it's why it's number 2, because you could hear the joyous moments and his voice in both the live and the recorded version, and it sort of sums him up completely. Number one. What will number one be, guys? What do you think? Oh, what will number one be? Oh, I don't know. It's nothing that you would think it would be. It is. There's two versions of this song. It's "Nuclear Attack" from Greg Lake's first solo album, Greg Lake. All right. It was also on Dirty Fingers, an album that came out, was shelved, as I mentioned. It was been released in Japan. The version that I will put at number one is the one with Greg Lake, because Greg Lake's vocals on it are brilliant, and I bloody love Greg Lake because Greg Lake is from Emerson, Lake and Palmer. For those who don't know, he was the bass player and singer, and he's one of my idols. I did a whole episode about Greg Lake. Please go back and have a listen. You might enjoy that. You might learn something different if you haven't gone back to my catalogue yet. It's way back, but you'll find it. Just trawl through and you will find the episode about Greg Lake and Nuclear Attack. The reason it's number one is because it's the most audacious, dynamic, fun. The solos in it are addictive. The sing-along chorus is wonderful. Greg's vocal is, as always, and always ever will be, brilliant. It's something different you don't expect from Greg. I mean, opening the album with Nuclear Attack from one of the leading lights of the prog movement is something. Wow, it's something different. When I first heard the album, and it was a very long time ago when I first heard it, I put it on and I was like, this is Greg Lake, what? Because it's a melange. Well, it's a nice word, isn't it? It sounds like a dessert, doesn't it? I'll have a strawberry melange, please. It's a melange. I'll say it again, of sort of heavy metal, heavy rock, and it's sort of bit of progginess, but it's got Greg's great vocal abilities on it, and it has this shearing, blistering, dynamic guitar solos in it that just take your breath away. It's my favorite guitar solo of Gary's, and it always will be. And it's one of those obscure ones. It's tucked away because it's on, an album that only got later released because Gary didn't like it and he shelved it, and then it got released in Japan, and it's on the opening track for Greg Lake's first album. If you're not Emerson, Lake and Palmer fan or a prog fan, why would you buy a Greg Lake album? So, nothing out. I mean, it was a single. Yes, it was, but wow, it epitomizes to me Gary's ability and his chameleonic form. He's one guitarist to one guitarist to another. He's neither one nor the other. He is a true blues man. But as I've said before earlier in this other episodes, blues is the bedrock of all rock and roll. And you deny that at your own cost. And Gary was consumed by, like a lot of boys of the 60s, if it wasn't the Beatles, it was American rock and roll. And if it wasn't American rock and roll, if you got into that and you got more sort of dived in because you wanted to be that kind of kid that wanted to learn more and hear more, then blues was where it hit. And blues being so addictive and so music of the devil, as they say, that's why Nuclear Attack is number one out. Okay, there is honorable mentions. I will give an honorable mention for number one, and After the War is one of them, because I think, again, that's another brilliant single, another brilliant song, because the guitar is very, very addictive. You could jump in and there's lots of things you could put in, Over the Hills and Far Away and all that sort of stuff, but again, people have heard that. People know that song. It was a big song. I want people to dive into music and learn things that they may not have done before. And if you go and listen to Greg Lake's album and hear Nuclear Attack, then listen to the rest of the album and hear Gary's other work on it. Now, it's not as Gary worked on the entire album, but this one is the main one. when you hear this, you will say, I am listening to a genius, and I have listened to a genius. And it's a hard and overused word, isn't it, genius? But it's the truth with some people. How those notes flow from his fingers and from his brain subconsciously, because he's singing as well, remember, and performing, is just, I don't know, it just makes you think that there is a true divinity out there that touches these people with his skill, and he touches us, doesn't he? Like, not in that way, you dirty money bastards, but he touches us in our musical souls and our day-to-day lives, and brings joy to it, takes us away on when we're feeling down, and lifts us up, and when we need to be we need diversion, he gives us diversion. When we need distraction, he gives us distraction. And when we need just beautiful music to feel beautiful moments, he does the same. And thank you, Gary. That's the end of my 2-part Gary Moore tribute. I've always wanted to do it. As I said before, I was a bit worried because so much to do, so much to talk about, and I don't want to undersell or oversell, but I'm going to oversell. Who gives a fuck? He's the best, all right? He will always be my favourite. More is best, not more is less, right? Not less is more, but more is best. That's what I'm going to say. I'm going to end on that one. So I hope you enjoyed that. Do go and, if you haven't heard any of those songs, go and take a listen. If you haven't listened to any of those albums, go and take a listen. They're all available on any platform you choose. These days, you can't really go wrong, can you? You can't really go wrong. That's the end of it this week. Thanks for listening to part 1 and 2. Thanks for making it really enjoyable. Next week's episode will be a dive into we're going back into extreme metal again. I had a fantastic night in the presence of Greek black metal royalty in Rotting Christ the other night, and American thrash legends, Jungle Rot. So it was just one of those cathartic, as my good friend Rory would say, it was a cathartic moment. It was a moment I'll never forget. And so we'll jump into extreme music next week. Might do another look at that and see, the first one was about a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago. So what do we think a year and a half on from that episode? I'll have to go back and listen to it, God forbid, my own voice, and then see, so I don't contradict myself. Anyway, that's enough for me for chatting on and warbling on. I've got things to do. You've got things to do. Bye for now. Keep safe. Remember, like, subscribe, review. Chat to you soon. Bye for now.
$1-800-Flowers.com is more than your birthday, anniversary, or just because gift-giving destination. We put our hearts into everything we do to help you celebrate all life's special occasions with friends and family. From our farmers and bakers, florists and makers, everything from 1-800-Flowers is made with love every step of the way, because we know that nothing is more important than delivering a smile. To learn more, visit 1-800-Flowers.com/ACAST. That's 1-800-Flowers.com/ACAST.
Acast powers the world's best podcasts. Here's a show that we recommend.
Hi, I'm Ando.
And I'm Fer.
And we host
Niñas Bien Podcast. We want to invite you to listen to our show.
Niñas Bien means good girls in Spanish, but you have to know that this is not a podcast for good girls.
Or for girls at all. It is a comedy podcast, so everyone is welcome to listen.
We talk about sex, relationships, technology.
We recommend movies and TV shows and discuss pop culture in general.
And there is Chisme Ajeno too.
A section we have just to gossip about everyone. So you'll find something you like here.
And you'll practice your Spanish.
The cleanest Spanish you'll find, we promise.
And if you already hablas español,
vamos a ser tus nuevas amigas. We'll be your friends for the non-Spanish speakers.
New episodes every Monday and Thursday.
Hosted by Acast and available to all audio platforms.
Acast helps creators launch, grow, and monetize their podcasts everywhere. Acast.com.